Yeah, I'd like to talk to you about how to check for sharpness in a knife blade. And a lot of people use various things to test things out, and a lot of times it's the hair on your arm, and that's a very good way to check to see if your knife is sharp. And there are others, though, that I'd like to point out today. First of all, in sharpening a knife, I'm not going to go into that, but if you have burrs on the edge of your blade, then as soon as you start cutting very long, the burrs will flatten over and it won't cut very well beyond that. And burrs is what I mean is little pieces of fragments of metal that have been left after sharpening and you haven't cleaned those off. A good strop will take that off, or other methods of sharpening as well. But one way to test is to take your finger and go away from the blade all the way through the blade and feel the edge and see if there's any places where it catches your finger. If it does, then you know you got a little burr there and you need to either strop it some more or take that off in a certain way. So knife sharpness, I really want to emphasize, is an important factor in knife safety. And Blade Sports organization that I belong to, in the knife cutting competitions, we have to have our big blades very sharp in order to cut through string, straws, very small stuff, up to big 2x4s as well. And so we really work on getting our knives as sharp as possible. I even use a magnifying glass and check my blade and see if it's even as you go across through the knife on both sides. And you can check for little divots or burrs as well with the magnifying glass. But to check for knife sharpness, one of the things that we just did not long ago was use a styrofoam noodle, and they're not very spendy, and these are more of the cheaper types that are more flexible, but they're really good to check and see if you have your knife sharp. And one of the competitions was just that, in checking to see if your knife is sharp. You can use that, and what the idea is to take off a piece of the noodle and have nothing left over, and it cuts it nice and cleanly. And we did that in the competition, and we had to have so many pieces cut off. Of course, you can use a small blade like that as well. It is a little bit longer, but a noodle is a really good way to check for sharpness in your blade. For example, the dollar blade here has a harder time in doing that. See how it's pushing the noodle around, and it just doesn't cut it off. So the dull blade is something that you can check to see. Now, I use paracord a lot, and I tie a lot of things, and so if your knife will cut through paracord really cleanly, really fast, then you know that you have a nice sharp blade as well. So I like to use paracord, and if it cuts through that easily, then without much effort or force, then you know that your blade is sharp. Just nice and easy. Watch the duller blade though. I really had to force that through. If it cuts cleanly, then it's a nice sharp blade. The fingernail test is another way where you have your fingernail at 45 degrees and the knife vertical, and if it doesn't slide off of the fingernail, then it's at least pretty sharp. But just another method to do that. And I'm not going to use the big knife for that, but you can see where even this little knife will stay there. This knife though, dull, it slips off. You can't, I'm just letting the weight of the knife hold it there, and it slips right off. So the dull knife doesn't work too well. Paper is another way to check for your knife sharpness. A lot of people think just because it cuts through the paper means that it's sharp, but you need to look, and you can look with a magnifying glass again and look and see if there's any little paper fragments on that. If it has a nice even cut like that, where now here right at the end you can see where I just wasn't cutting very good, probably can't see, but there's a little fluffy fragment phrase there. And if you see that in a blade that you're using, then you know it's not sharp. See, I can't even cut through this knife. So paper is a really good way to check to see if your knife is sharp, because it'll cut nice and clean. Anyway, paper, cord, noodle, the hair on your arm, any other methods you can come up with to check for sharpness. Some people use rope and how fast they can cut through a piece of rope, either by crunching like this or by just sawing, but I find that it really doesn't test it that much. It just tests if you can get through the rope. But the methods I have shown you so far, I think, are the best ones, at least some of the best ones, to check for knife sharpness. And knife sharpness is really important, because if it isn't sharp, it may snag on something or be more dangerous than a really sharp knife. So I emphasize that. Thank you.